a big Conservative majority. It didn't transpire. It did predict losses for the SNP. Granted, not as many as they lost. Liberal Democrats had a better night than I thought. Plaid Cymru had a better night than I thought. The Green Party had a very similar night to what I thought. UKIP had equally a very similar night to what I thought. Only thing that was worse for UKIP was their vote share. But let's just talk about then. Ultimately, it's true to say this. It's been a bad night for the Tories. It was not a good night. And it wasn't a good night for Brexiteers. I'm not happy. I'm not confident. And, I'm really disappointed. I mean, Theresa May came in to strengthen her hand to increase the majority, and she has failed. And there are many reasons for that, but I think there's three major reasons. I think there's two reasons that have happened, in the election, that if we wouldn't have seen them happen, would have changed the result. And I also think there's another reason for it as well, and we'll go through it. I think one of the big things is the fact that the youth vote turned out in mass to vote for Jeremy Corbyn last night. There's talk of 72% voter turnout for 18 to 24-year-olds. That's up from about 41% in 2015. That is huge. And about 70% of 16 to 22-year-olds, 18 to 24-year-olds, vote or would say they were going to vote Labour, and no doubt they did. That has meant that marginal seats that the Tories thought they had, target seats, have gone comfortably to the Labour Party. And where universities are, due to the free tuition pledge that Jeremy Corbyn and his party made, it meant that majorities were increased there if Labour had them, and if they didn't, they were able to win some. London certainly came through for Labour as well. I think, again, a lot of that was due to the youth vote. Simply, it's off the premise of Labour buying the youth's vote. So I'm going to be real with you here. I think the youth, 18 to 24-year-olds, stereotypically, ideologically driven. I think it just goes to show what happens when you put people through, 12 odd years of left-wing education. During high school, you're never ever, whenever socialism spoke about, it spoke about in a positive light, and not that it's failed multiply. And no surprise really that they've come out ideologically driven as socialists, without the premise, without the knowledge that the socialism has failed. Hell, perhaps they do know. And yeah, they've been convinced with free stuff, free tuition, which doesn't help. I mean, it's not worked in Scotland in reducing the divide in people going to university. At the end of the day, university should be for the best people. It should not be for everyone. And the way the system is at the moment, tuition fees are there, and you do get them, but you don't have to start paying back your tuition fee until you earn a certain amount of money. And if you don't earn a certain amount of money, you may never ever have to pay back your tuition fee. And when you do earn a certain amount of money, it's not, a substantial amount of money coming from your salary. So I think the system works very well, and I think it's in many ways selfish. Maybe not selfish, but for the Labour Party, they have certainly bought the youth's vote, and they've promised free stuff, and it seems like 18 to 24-year-olds seem to have not grasped the concept yet that nothing is free in life. And although, yes, they may be getting these free stuff at this age, but once they get a job and they have a house and they have a kid, in 10 years or so time, they'll start to realise, oh, nothing is free, now we've got to pay, and now, the country's got to pick up the pieces. Now, luckily, I think we'll avoid a Jeremy Corbyn government and a Jeremy Corbyn administration pushing through his agenda, which I think is a good thing. But the fact that the youth have been manipulated so easily is very, very worrying, in my opinion. And ultimately, I think a lot of it as well is the fact that 18 to 24-year-olds weren't old enough, really, to understand, unless they've looked in depth at, the IRA, as I have. They don't necessarily understand just how brutal and vicious and murderous the IRA were, and how Corbyn's links, and in many people regard it as outright support for the IRA, hasn't really been a big thing with the youth, because they simply don't know the sheer horrific nature of the IRA, as much as perhaps people a hell of a lot older. Same with the Falklands War. Again, young people perhaps don't know a lot about the Falklands War. Corbyn called it a Tory plot. It is what it is at the end of the day. As I say, Labour has been able to manipulate with a Marxist kind of approach the young vote with free stuff and free tuition. Unfortunately, what they will learn later on in life is nothing is free in life. But luckily, I don't think the Corbyn administration will be going through this election, at least. So that's what I think's a big thing. Look, I said if youth turn out in big numbers, we're in trouble, and it proved to be the case. I did not expect a 72 monster turnout. I expected over 50%. In fact, that's what I predicted. I got that right, but I did not expect 72%. That is insane. I suppose you have to, in some respects, give credit to the youth, although I think they've been manipulated, and I think their vote has been bought. They did get off their arse. They did finally show that they give a shit. So I suppose, in some respects, we should praise them. But I don't think it's complete blame on young people and the 18 to 24-year-olds as to what happened in this election. I think another massive factor, and I think the second big factor, is the fact that the UKIP vote dissolved, but 1/3 of the UKIP vote went to the Labour Party, and I simply do not understand that. And UKIPers out there have to hang their head in shame if they voted for anybody other than the Tory party last night, because they have jeopardised Brexit in doing so. 1/3 voting for Labour, to me, is absolutely insane. Again, convinced with free stuff. I understand a lot of UKIP supporters came originally from Labour. There were Labour UKIP switchers. That was a thing. But at the end of the day, surely as a UKIPper, your main things are Brexit, immigration reform, tackling terrorism. All three of which Corbyn has a bad record on. And has, not a bad record on, terrorist tackling he does. Brexit and immigration he doesn't, but he has said that, from what he's been saying, who knows where he is for Brexit, who knows, where he stands on that. And as for immigration, he's said he doesn't want to put a number on it. So I think it's absolutely insane that they have voted for the Labour Party, and ultimately they are traitors. I'm gonna put it out there right now, outright traitors. They really are. I can understand the UKIP vote a little bit more than the Labour vote, but I cannot for the life of me understand the Labour vote. I really, really can't. You have jeopardised Brexit, and even though Jeremy Corbyn has not got in, you have jeopardised Brexit by removing Theresa May's majority in the House of Commons, and meaning that the Brexit that we get now will certainly not be the Brexit that the British people voted for on, I was about to say June the 8th, but that wasn't the date, June the 23rd, June the 24th, can't remember what day it was. So they have to take big blame, and I think if the youth didn't turn out, and they turned out the way they did in 2015, then I think we'd have seen a massive majority for the Conservatives. And I think if the Labour vote, if the UKIP vote would have gone, to, even a quarter. So with every 5 votes, every 10 UKIP voters from 2015, if 2 of them stayed with UKIP, 2 went to Labour and 6 went to the Tories, I think that would have been, more than fun. They'd have probably still got a majority. So they are the 2 big things on election night that cost the Tories. Some out of their control, others not out of their control. I think the big thing, though, is that Theresa May's campaign and manifesto was a disaster. Whether we're talking about dementia tax, whether we're talking about fox hunting, it was not necessary. There was no requirement for it. It was a poor campaign. She didn't step up on terrorism until right towards the end. She flip-flopped on issues. She came across as relatively weak, let's be honest here. It was a poor campaign, probably one of the worst campaigns that we've seen the Conservatives run. You can't just blame Theresa May, but of course she was the leader and it was her campaign, so she has to take a lot of the blame, but the people behind the scenes have to take big blame for that as well. It was a poor campaign. She didn't do a debate, which looked like a mistake. I mean, I understand why she didn't. It was a terrible debate and they were just shouting at each other, but she should have done the debate. And I think there was a lot of complacency with the Tories. And I think they ended up paying for that. I think for me now, Theresa May's position is untenable. She has to resign. I understand in many respects why she hasn't instantly resigned and why we may get a week or so of stability, but her position is simply untenable, and she has to go. And we have to get a new Tory leader, an election called for later on this year, probably October time, which probably mean I will miss out on voting again. But I think that's what's going to happen. Whether it be Boris Johnson or David Davis, or hell, if Ruth Davidson was an MP, I think she'd be in with a big shout. Amber Rudd, I've heard spoke about. Rudd, I don't think is a good choice. I like Boris, but is he one to unify the party? Will he have a better showing? I think he'd do a better showing, yes. I think David Davis would be the smart choice for the Conservative Party. A logical head, a calm head, a Brexiteer. That's the important thing. The Conservative Party made a mistake. They should have had a Brexiteer as MP in this election, and they'd have won it. It was a big mistake choosing a Remainer. And although, yes, she's converted to Brexit, apparently, it's simply not paid off. David Davis, though, would be the Brexiteer. A calm head would I think, win back some of those seats that the Conservative Party lost this election. But it's not been a good night for the Tories. It really, really hasn't. And it seems like the British public are okay with having a terrorist sympathiser near to number 10, and that worries the hell out of me. But there you go. The SNP, bad night. That's one silver lining for Tory voters, and a very good night in Scotland for the Tories. I think 13 odd gains or 11 gains in Scotland for the Tories. Ruth Davidson ran an incredible campaign there. What an incredible campaign that was. And the SNP have just fell off the face of the earth. Quite clearly, Scotland does not want an independence referendum number 2, and I think that's almost dead in the water now. Nicola Sturgeon is trying to spin it into saying that they are still the biggest party, but it's a bad night for SNP, and we'll have to wait and see what this means for Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of Scotland. Of course, Angus Robertson has lost his seat, the leader of the SNP, so we expect him to resign. He'll go. That's just an outright obvious one, I suppose. And more importantly, I suppose you could argue, Alex Salmond has lost his seat as well. A lot of people cheery about that last night. Other big casualties seat-wise, there was worry at one point that Amber Rudd was going to lose her seat. She did manage to narrowly hold on to it. Tim Farron narrowly held on to his seat as well. Again, there was worries within the Lib Dem camps early on in the night that he might lose his seat too. But a big loss for the Liberal Democrats has to be the loss of Nick Clegg. Of course, was Deputy Prime Minister in the coalition with the Conservative Party in 2010, famously went back on his free tuition fee pledge, and it really cost him and his party, and it looks like he is out of politics. Massive result there. I mean, I did call that before the election, but it's still a seismic shock. I think Alex Salmond was probably the biggest shock of the night. And even in some respects, Ipswich, the guy who writ the Conservative manifesto as part of the Tory manifesto, Ben Grimmer, lost his seat in Ipswich to the Labour Party. Massive loss there. I mean, they had a big majority. And it went Canterbury, went away from the Tories. A massive result there for Labour. One that you just cannot explain. Peterborough, who had a pro-Brexit MP, voted for Brexit in the masses, in the majority, 60-odd%. in the EU referendum. UKIP didn't stand to aid that pro-Brexiteer, and they lost their seat. It just doesn't make sense, a lot of it. So, I mean, try and work that one out. Mad results, really, across the board. Liberal Democrats, in the end, a good night. Some gains for them. The Green Party all but lost pretty much everything, bar their solitary seat. I believe Caroline Lucas held on to that, but their vote share massively gone down. It's like it's almost gone to the Labour Party. So, yeah, I mean, ultimately, nobody, I think, really, apart from possibly